Why don't you say so? They watch my moves, yeah, do my dance. I'm a skinny little bitch, still shaking ass. And ain't shit free, niggas show me cash. Fuck a broke boy, I been had a bag. I come in first place, I never been last. A bitch act stupid, bitch get trashed.
This is going to be a story time about how my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. Why was they looking for his ass? I'm gonna get into it. Let me clarify right now that I am a victim. I do not want nobody in the comments saying, why didn't you do this? Why did you do this? It could have been me. It could have been any of us. That's why I minded my business throughout this whole thing. So I got to school a little late that day, but when I got to my class, I could tell there was a little tension in the air. I didn't know what it was, whether it was a teacher having a problem with a student or a student having a problem with another student. I just knew that the energy was off. So I'm sitting down in class minding my business per usual. The next thing I see is my teacher try to grab this one boy's phone. He immediately snatches it off his desk before she can grab it. That's when they get into this little tug of war type of thing. But the next thing you know, everybody sees this boy mollywop the teacher in the stomach. She falls and he runs out the classroom. Some kids started laughing and thought it was funny until the teacher wasn't waking up. This is when things get bad, like for part 2. This is going to be part 2 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So like I said, this kid punched this teacher and ran out the classroom, and the teacher wasn't waking up anymore. So as you can imagine, a room full of drained high school students who just woke up a few hours ago, we were all kind of just like looking around at each other. No one thought to, I don't know, tell somebody that this shit happened. Like, were we silent? Or were we silenced? I blame the school system for making school so early because I feel like once you get to school, your cognitive functions get out the window. So I really try hard not to feel guilty about this, and I try not to blame my other classmates for not doing anything as well. And then eventually like 5 minutes pass and then we're like, okay, maybe we should check if she's awake at least. That's when one of the students get up and start to check. Well, they check and they say that she's not breathing. It's obviously set something off in our brains, like this is an emergency, something needs to happen now. That's when a bunch of us ran to the office and they called the ambulance, like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. We went to the office and told them how the kid punched the teacher and the teacher wasn't waking up. Immediately, a bunch of staff ran to the class to see where the teacher was and what was going on with her. I didn't personally run to the office. When I say we, I mean my classmates. So I was still in the classroom when all the staff ran in. So they told everybody to exit the classroom and everybody needed to get out of the classroom because they needed to give her some privacy and examine her. So we were all standing outside of my classroom and it was like 30 kids. The teacher that was next door to us was really close to my teacher. They would always talk in the hallways. They had their lunch periods together, their study periods together, and her door was wide open. Why didn't we go in there and tell her what happened? Honestly, like I said, we were high school students. It was really early. So she came out once she saw all of us standing outside in the hallway and she was like, what's going on? Once we told her that a kid punched the teacher and that she passed out, her face drops and she announced that the teacher was pregnant. Mind you, nobody knew this because she hadn't announced it herself yet. This is when they called the ambulance, like for part 3. This is going to be part 4 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So now everybody knows that this teacher who is passed out on the floor and is not waking up is pregnant. That's when they decided to call the ambulance. I'm guessing they didn't call the ambulance earlier because they were waiting to see if they could try to get her to wake up. They went ahead and put the whole school on lockdown. Nobody was allowed to leave their class, and me and my classmates went into the teacher's classroom next to us. We were sitting in the classroom for like a couple hours, and throughout these couple of hours, what we were hearing outside of the classroom was complete chaos. There was a bunch of cops, a bunch of cop radios, there was dogs. We heard a bunch of yelling and running, and that's when the announcements go off once again. And that's when they announce that they're looking for that kid and they can't find him anywhere in the school, and they're gonna let the day go back to normal, but if anybody sees him, to report it. At this point, everyone at school already knew what happened because of social media, and once they heard on the announcements that they had permission to look for the kid, lots of kids took that as this is a scavenger hunt. When I say lots of kids, I mean the whole school, like for part 5. This is going to be part 5 of the time our whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So once they announced to report the kid who punched the pregnant teacher in the stomach if we see him throughout the school day, lots of kids took that as find him and bring him to me and started hunting him down. I mean, like, as they should. So anyways, yeah, complete chaos broke out. As soon as that bell rang, child, you would be able to leave school and nobody would notice. Everybody was in the hallways. People were looking under the stairwells. They were checking in the janitor's closet, opening up doors that they shouldn't be opening. And with everybody looking for this kid, we found him pretty fast. We did what the police and police dogs couldn't do. This kid was hiding in the band room under the band instructor's desk. They found him and arrested him on school property. We got word that that teacher did in fact lose her baby, but she was okay and she was alive, but she chose not to work at that school again. But she never came back, and I don't know, I think that kid is still in prison.
Extremely creepy story time on how my aunt passed away. So a little background information. About 5 years ago, my aunt had gotten pregnant. It was really weird because a few months before she got pregnant, the doctor told her that she would never be able to have kids. And her husband had been trying for years. Well, I think like 2 weeks after the baby was born, it had passed away. And I don't really know why. For some reason, my mom won't tell me. Which is weird, but anyways, after that, my aunt just felt like a lot of things weren't going the way that she wanted them to in her life. So she decided to get closer with God. Well, every Sunday night, we go to my grandparents' house for a family dinner. And while we were there, my aunt starts going on this whole rampage. She said that God's not giving her the answers that she needs, and I don't really know what she means by answers. So my grandparents kick her out because she's acting like a psycho. Well, the same night at 3 a.m. in the morning, we hear a knocking on the door. And lo and behold, it's my aunt. So my mom lets her in because she feels bad and feels like she's the only one that will actually listen to my aunt. So she makes everybody sit at the kitchen table. And she pulls out a Ouija board from her bag, like for part 2. Creepy story time about how my aunt passed away, part 2. So like I said, she makes us all sit down at the kitchen table and she pulls out a Ouija board. She was like, I found out how I can get some answers. I just feel like I need you guys around me for positive energy. And my family is very, very religious. Like, we don't fuck with that shit. Because my mom felt bad for her, she let her use it in our house. But my mom didn't want my sisters and I around that, so she just sent us to bed. Well, the next morning, I wake up and I ask my mom what happened with the Ouija board situation. My mom just said that it was really scary, because before she thought it was like a load of bullshit, and she said that her and my dad didn't touch the Ouija board, because like I said, they were very religious and did not mess with that stuff. But apparently, it said for her not to buy a house with the numbers 2815. Well, 2 years later, my aunt got remarried, and her husband ended up having 2 kids. So they bought a new house, and no, it didn't have the numbers on it. One of their kids accidentally shattered the glass door, so they went and got a new one, and it came with those exact numbers on it. 2 days later, the house burnt down and nobody survived.
Story time on how I found out my sister was actually my mom. My parents were much more older than me, and I always felt more distant from them than any of my siblings. I'm 17 years old. I grew with a big family. I have 5 siblings. My sister is 30, brother 29, another brother that's 29, and both of my sisters are 24 and 22. I always realized there was a big gap between me and the rest of them. I always figured that maybe I was an accident or unplanned. Being the youngest, I was spoiled all of the time. The way they treated me is how you would expect them to treat the youngest. My older sister Hannah always took care of me the best. I always saw her as a mother figure, never knowing that she was actually my real mom. She spent most of her time with me more than my other brothers and sisters. And she often took care of me when my mom wasn't there. And my parents were much more older than me, so I always felt like there was a distance between us. I ended up finding out Hannah was my mom after both of my parents passed away. If you want to know exactly how I found out, please come back for part 2. Part 2 on how I found out my sister was actually my mom. When my father passed away, it was probably the worst part of my life. I was 8 years old. I did not take it well at all. I cried for weeks and I went crazy. I threw fits at people. I know my siblings were all going through this just as bad as I was, but I made it all about me. I didn't consider them or what they had been going through the whole time. And recently, the same thing happened to my mom. It hit me just as hard, if not harder. She'd been sick for a long time and slowly getting worse. I wasn't ready for it at all. It was after this Hannah told me the truth. She sat me down and braced me that what she was about to tell me, I would be shocked. She knew that we all were still recovering from my mother's passing, but a few weeks had passed and she felt like it was enough time to wait before actually coming out with the truth. Sorry, I can't do 3-minute long videos, but come back for part 3 if you want to know exactly how she explained that she was my mom. So, part 3 on how I found out my sister was actually my mom. She said she always wanted to tell me, and only now she could finally. When she was 13, as many stupid kids do, she had unprotected ex with a boy, and she had got pregnant, and that child was me. At the time, her parents wanted to give her baby up for adoption, but she was unshakable and wanted to keep her child. She completely refused to give me away. They eventually agreed to keep me, and would raise me in their household, but with their parents as the guardians, and I would grow up thinking that they were my real parents. Apparently, some of my older siblings also knew, but they never mentioned it. In fact, they're actually my aunts and uncles. My mother made Hannah swear that she would never tell me, and that she could only tell me sometime after her death. She said she wanted to die as a mother, not a grandmother. Hannah said all my life she wanted to tell me, but swore not to. And she was glad that she was able to tell me the truth. But if you want to know how I reacted to the whole situation, part 4 coming up.
Story time about how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies that I met at the strip club. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent to me on Instagram. I have been a tripper for 2 years. And yes, I will be referring to myself as a tripper. A few months ago, I started looking for new ways to earn money because I don't want to be a tripper for the rest of my life. Well, around that time, a group of guys came into the club. One of them was super nice and he kept tipping me all night. He literally just talked to me the whole night. He didn't even get dances from other girls and didn't ask me to do anything else other than just talk. I basically made my entire rent just from all the tips he gave me. By the end of the night, he had asked me for my number and I gave it to him, which is super uncommon. I never give out my number, but this guy was really nice. A few days later, we went out to dinner and he asked me if I wanted to be his sugar baby. I said yes immediately. Ever since then, we hang out once a week, and he pays me on average $4,000 a month. A few months into our arrangement, he asked me if I wanted to quit the strip club. I said probably not, but he told me that eventually he wanted me to. A few weeks ago, this new guy comes into the club, and he also asked me to be his sugar baby, so I said yes. This is where things get scary. Part 2 is Part 2 of how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies I met at the trip club. Now I basically have to choose between one of them. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So this other guy comes into the club and asked me if I want to be a sugar baby. I immediately said yes. This man owned several businesses and everyone knew him around town. A week into our arrangement, he started becoming really jealous. He was constantly asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I had other sugar daddies. Of course I said no. That's when I realized I had to hide everything from both of these guys. Luckily, the second sugar daddy traveled a lot. He would FaceTime me all the time and even ask me to turn on my location. The only reason I put up with it was because he was giving me $7,000 a month. That's when sugar daddy number 1 asked me to quit the club again. And I basically said yes because I was getting enough money. I didn't realize it then, but he basically took that as me saying that I wanted to be in a relationship with him. That's when he started wanting to come over to my place all the time and basically spend every single day with me. So I would tell him I was going to the gym, but really I was going to go see my other sugar daddy. Then sugar daddy number 2 asked me if I wanted to move into a better apartment, and he became my co-signer. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I ended up with 2 sugar daddies and I had to choose between one of them. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So sugar daddy number 2 offers me an apartment and wants to be my co-signer. And the apartment was so beautiful. It was 2 bedrooms, had a washer dryer inside the unit. It even had a doorman and a pool and everything. It was a huge step up from the place I had. This is when sugar daddy number 1 started getting really suspicious. He asked me how I could afford it. Then I broke the news to him that I had a second sugar daddy. He freaked out and told me I needed to choose between him or the other guy. I can't tell sugar daddy number 2 because he's super jealous, but my gut tells me to go with sugar daddy number 2. He pays me more money and gave me the apartment, but number 1 is super nice. But number 2 travels all the time, so I don't have to see him all the time. I don't know. What do you guys think I should do? I love my new apartment though. What do I do?
I got married 4 years ago, and my husband and his family are many times over millionaires. My family is just middle class. Our wedding cost around $700K paid by him and his parents. My parents gave me a flat fee of $10K for a dress, which they're also giving to my sister too. Sister and her fiance are lower class. She has $170K in student loan while he has $110. They have $18K in medical debt and $35K in credit card debt. Well, last night was my sister's birthday dinner, and she announced she was engaged and wanted help paying for her wedding. She gave me a spreadsheet of how much she was going to need for her dream wedding. Anyways, her dream wedding is supposed to cost $100K, and as her only sister, I need to step up and help pay for her wedding since her parents are only giving her $10K for a dress. She said she needs me to give her at least $70K since I'm rich now. When I told her I'm not giving her $70K, she cried and said it wasn't fair how I get whatever I want. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she broke down about how I'm just using motherhood to be greedy and lazy. I have 2-year-old twins. I eventually told her I wasn't going to be bullied into giving her $70K. She's 15 weeks pregnant, hence